Michigan football recruiting is back. They are back on the road after some recruiting restrictions. They've hit the road hard. Couple commits in, official visits getting scheduled. We've got a lot to talk about. Let's do it. Who's got next? Ooh, welcome in. Glad to have you guys in here on Who's Got Next, the recruiting podcast brought to you by Maize Blue Review. Been a minute since we did one of these, but there is tons of information out there and a new messenger to bring it to you. Really excited for you guys to see him on screen. For those of you not familiar, I didn't even ask you. I should have asked you before we went on. How do you pronounce? I want to make sure I get your last name right. How's your last name?
Sen.
Sen.
Aidan
Perfect.
Sen.
I figured it was. Loyal watchers know I butcher last names all the time, and it's an issue and something I'm super paranoid about. So anyway, Mr. Aidan Sen, who built his own following in this incredible work he was doing, just running a Twitter account and making connections. And we've brought him on, and he's just been an absolute home run for us over at Maize Blue Review. So first off, what time is it for you over in Australia? How you doing? Thanks for coming in.
I'm doing great. It's 12:01 over here, but we're doing all right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's all good. We
All
got
right,
free
that's
periods
nice.
tomorrow morning, so we're chilling out.
All right, dude. Little midnight recruiting talk. That works.
Yeah.
So, look, we touched on it a little bit. Michigan takes themselves off the road, out of the recruiting bubble for a few weeks. And then immediately, not like people expected them to be sitting on their hands during that time, but they clearly had a plan once it was time to hit the road again. Couple commits that get locked up, couple tight ends. We can touch on that, but just giving kind of the initial feedback you're hearing from recruits, families, their coaches with Michigan back on the trail.
Yeah, so I think they visited over 30 recruits over the week. So that was last week, after they had that month-long dead period. And the staff did a really impressive job of getting out to recruits, particularly John Murray, the linebackers coach. He did a really impressive job. And I think all the returns came back positive. We got the two commits, as you referenced, Ludwig and Bonner, the two tight ends. And I think they're well positioned to land a few more recruits in the official visits coming up over the next few weekends.
Very busy schedule that they're lining up in terms of official visits starting this week. Does Michigan feel like, or I guess the recruits in general, right? We hear so much about how much the communication matters and hearing from the coaches is often. Does Michigan feel like they have to make up some ground, or was it kind of just pause for a little bit? And now that these visits are getting scheduled, you mentioned they're in good position with a few. Who are some of those recruits that maybe they're close to closing, and maybe a couple that there is some ground to make up?
Oh, well, in terms of the players that they visited on the road, I think Malachi Lee, the four-star offensive tackle from Hawaii, he's in a really good spot for Michigan to land a commitment there during his official visit over Victor's weekend, I think, June 20th. I think he's set to come in. So Grant Newsom's visited him four times throughout his recruitment period, and it's done a really impressive job. They're I had a full interview with Malachi over I think last week. That full article is on the Maize Blue site, Maize Blue Review site. And I think they were really happy with it. Malachi was really happy with it. Grant Newsom got to talk to his coach, his offensive line coach, got to talk to his family, spent the whole day out there. And I think Michigan's well positioned there. The main competition was USC going into the spring period. But they landed a commit from five-star offensive tackle Kimi Pepe, I think. I talked about last names. I'm not sure about that one, but um, I think that may have helped out Michigan a bit because I know that I think when he was mentioning his top contenders, he didn't mention USC, which kind of gave me even more of an impression that Michigan was really well positioned to land a commitment. But going back on if they need to make up time, I think there was a thought, particularly from myself, and I think from a lot of other viewers on the Maize Blue Review site, that there was ground to make up, but I don't think that the staff really viewed it that way, and I don't think that a lot of the recruits viewed it that way. So I think Michigan did a really, really impressive. I mean, I'm not sure if they're aware of this recruiting sanction period in the spring, but they got a lot of recruits in the spring to come over and watch spring visits and watch Bryce Story, and I think it was the most spring visitors that they've ever had on campus throughout that 2-month period. And I think they did a really impressive job in that period. which then made the lack of communication over that last month less of an impact, I think.
It's such a good point. And we talked a ton about whatever. Not only is the star freshman quarterback a big deal for the program and on the field, but he's become a massive recruiting tool for them. Every
Yeah, for
recruit,
sure.
when you talk to him, it's the aura around Bryce. They say it's pretty remarkable. I do want to build real quick before we move on to the next group. Malachi Lee obviously is a big potential get. Offensive line recruiting in general, does it feel like, I know you've posted on quite a few guys that are visiting. Leo Delaney's one that comes to mind right away. But does it feel like that big board is kind of starting to sort out where we know where Michigan's top targets are? And how many guys do you think they're going to take there? I mean, they had the full 5 in 24. They took 4 last year, some higher end guys as well. And it looks like they're going for another loaded 4 or 5 offensive linemen in this class. But where do you think guys sit right now in terms of the board and how many they could take?
Yeah, I think they're in number one, the top 3 for a number of recruits. So, I referenced Malachi Lee. He's actually built up a strong friendship with Kelvin Obert, who's also scheduled to take an official visit on June 20th on that same weekend with Malachi Lee. He's another one that they're well positioned for. I think Oregon is the main competition there. And then also, Carter Scruggs is a swing guy. He plays offensive tackle and interior offensive line. They're well positioned for him. And then we've got the commitment from Bear McWhorter. He's projected as a center. That I think he's pretty well committed there. I don't think he's really taking any other visits at the moment. He's not really hearing from any other schools at the moment, or he's uh, not locked off communication. And then John Turntime is a more interesting one. That one is a Michigan's in an interesting spot for him, I'd say. He was originally scheduled to visit on May 30th, but he's rescheduled that for June 13th, which I think is positive because you want to be as close to the commitment as possible for that official visit. For the official visit, sorry.
You get
But I think that they're well positioned for him. So I think I named Obert Lee, they're true tackles, and then Scruggs and Turntine, who are those swing guys. So similar to Ty Hayward, which we saw last cycle. They can play offensive tackle or interior offensive line. And then you've also got Leo Delaney, as you referenced. I think Michigan's number one, I'd say, pretty confidently at the moment. Tennessee's in a good spot there as well, but I think Michigan is clearly number one. And then Jax Tanner is another one who they're targeting at that center position, which I find interesting because I think they're planning on moving Bear McWhorter into that center position. So I find it interesting that they're going so hard for Tanner, who's also got an official visit scheduled. And then the one other name is Darius Gray, but his official visit schedule was too packed in the summertime, so he's not going to be able to get in for an official visit in June or at the end of this month. So, and I think South Carolina and LSU have done a good job in his recruitment and might be able to shore up a commitment there. But yeah, I think there's a really solid chance, as you say, of them taking a full slate of 5 offensive linemen this cycle as well.
and a theme that seems to be continuing. You touched on it, but they're going after top tackles, and then maybe some swing guys that could potentially play guard. In recent years, we've seen Michigan basically have really talented guards and then kind of moving those guys to tackle.
Mm.
And now it seems like they're doing the obvious. Ty Haywood's a great example. He's probably a starting guard next season,
Mm.
right? And that, former tackle. But the Bear thing's interesting. I always viewed him as a guard, and then I heard some of this center conversation as well. So them going after a center, I don't know if that's just, hey, we have the versatility. We'll see how it plays out, or if they actually think he could be interior. Once the commits start
I think
dropping, I'm
it's
sure it'll make more sense. But
I think it's more of the idea of just getting your 5 best offensive linemen on the field at all times. Because I mean, just from a pure interior offensive line perspective, I don't think it's that this cycle isn't very strong from a pure interior offensive lineman. But I
for
think
sure.
that, just from my view of the cycle, but, I think or they're just choosing not to target them, and they think they're better positioned for the offensive tackles. But I think, like, we'll see, like, even next year, I think, I was just looking at a depth chart, and I think there's even a chance they move Evan Link inside to left guard, in place of Andrew Babalola at that left tackle spot. So I think that's just kind of a trend that we'll start seeing more moving forward.
Yeah, I mean that's been a hot subject, obviously, on the podcast is where Evan Link ends up. And yeah, I'm with you. I think whether Babalola wins the job or not this year, he's obviously the future at left tackle.
Yeah.
Andrew Sprague is the future at right tackle. Ty Haywood is probably the future at right guard, would be the guess, right? And then
Yeah.
Jake Gardera is going to take over at center. So now you've got Blake Frazier and Avery Gatch are two guard potential guys fighting, and then Evan Link, where does he fit in? And Afobe's still
And
out there. And then you're trying to bring in
Norton
5 more
too.
recruits. Yeah, and Norton
Yeah, I
too.
mean, yeah, they've got a lot of guys in there.
Yeah, and so it's pretty impressive that, again, if they get another group of 5,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good run. How
Yeah.
much,
Yeah, for
not to
sure.
hang on offensive line again, but I think amongst the fan base, at least early on in the Sharon Moore era, I think Grant Newsome probably gets the most, I don't know if negative tension is the right word, but a lot of fans feel like they're uncertain with Newsome, right? Obviously, that has to probably do with the drop off we saw at offensive line play last year. Michigan and Moore have made some moves like bringing in Juan Castillo to try shore things up there. But on the recruiting trail, when you're talking to these recruits, what kind of feedback are you getting in terms of Grant Newsome as a recruiter? And, how much of a role is Sharon Moore playing when it comes to a lot of these offensive line recruitments?
I mean, I think what we saw last cycle was Babalola was Sherone Moore. So,
Yeah.
5-star offensive tackle. That was Sherone Moore's doing. I think Greg Newsom played a role in that. So he maintains communication with Babalola till the end when Sherone Moore really made that push to secure the recruitment. But this cycle, I think it's been Grant Newsom the whole way through. I think that we saw Sherone Moore go out with Grant Newsom to Hawaii in January to visit Malachi Lee. But in that same period, Sherman Moore visited with Savion Hiter and Jalen Pyle and another number of other recruits that weren't on the offensive line. And from returns, like, I mean, as I said before, Malachi Lee was super happy with Grant Newsom coming off that recent visit. And Leo Delaney, I spoke to him and his mum, and they were both super happy with Grant Newsom. And I think it's been Grant Newsom. He's done his job really well on the recruiting trail. And I don't know if all that discourse around Grant Newsom was really reasonable because I mean you consider Michigan's offensive line in 2023, going into into last season. I mean, those are all like 3 or 4 year starters that have gone in and gone straight to the NFL. So the guys behind them haven't had a chance, I guess. You don't see as much rotation on the offensive line as you see elsewhere. And yeah, I think he's done a good job. I'd be pretty pleased with him if I was showing more about how he's done this cycle so far.
That's really good feedback. And I mean, honestly, more being able to spend more time with the offensive line and then Castillo coming in, like that's all good things. And you could argue it allows Newsom to focus more on recruiting too, which is something he's been really good at in the past. So
Yeah,
interesting here that he's been more involved this cycle. Obviously if they close with a good class, then that'll be something to give him credit for, right?
yeah,
You mentioned the name that I think has probably been the hottest in the last week, because anytime you feel like Michigan leads for somebody, then Ohio State creeps in. Michigan fans get nervous. Savion Hiter, running back, been one of Michigan's top targets for a long time. Like Tony Alford hasn't tried to hide the fact that Hiter and Osborne were his top 2 targets, right? Osborne obviously ends up at Notre Dame. They're going to take 2 running backs, and there are other backs here that I like a lot. Latimer is one of my favorite in this class. I think his tape is unbelievable. If you don't get Hiter and you get Latimer, I'm going to be happy. That said, Hiter feels like a must get, almost from like a narrative perspective, in terms of like if you did lose Osborne to ND and then Hiter to Ohio State, you can tell me about if it's Ohio State or Tennessee or who you're more worried about there. But again, just from the set of these were my top 2 guys, you got to get one of them. It feels like Hiter's a must get, but I like Latimer, and you can mention some of the other guys that have been getting offered. But where is running back recruiting, and more importantly, where do you think things stand with Tony Alford, Savion Hiter, now that the coach has been able to reach out and speak with him, and I believe visited him last week as well, right?
yeah. So Tony Alford visited him last week. He visited Savion and his family, but I think not to compare the two, but I think last cycle, if Michigan hadn't landed Bryce Underwood, I think Michigan fans would have come away unhappy, no matter if they'd come away with the number one recruiting class, but they hadn't landed Bryce Underwood. I think it's the same thing with Savion Hiter this cycle. I mean, I appreciate that he's a running back, not a quarterback, and he's not even a 5-star on all the sites, but it's about that narrative, I suppose. And I think that
Right.
Hiter is Michigan's number one recruit. He's their number one target this year. I mean, turn times rated higher, and um, I know Trenton Henderson and Carter Meadows are rated higher on some sites. But I think Michigan, they love Savion Hiter, and I think what it would come down to is the fact that Savion Hiter is Michigan's guy, and I think that he's their only guy, as you said, that if they miss out on Hiter, and after having already missed out on Osborne, they'll be in the ditches. But I think that yeah, I think that in the end, despite the fact that I think Tennessee has done well, I think Ohio State has done well. I think Michigan will come away with the commitment in the end, following his official visit or at some point later on in the cycle. Because, well, there was a lot of worry about Hyder visiting Ohio State and Tennessee in the spring and not visiting Michigan.
Right.
But those visits were purely because Ohio State and Tennessee both had new running back coaches in the building. So Hyder needs to go out and visit them and check them out and see what the vibe was there and see how much they were prioritizing him. And I think that, I mean, obviously Tennessee, I think from my perspective, Tennessee is more of a threat than Ohio State. I think uh, Ohio State has some other guys that they're looking at, like Favre Key, I think is one of the guys they're looking at, and Derek Cooper. They're well positioned to land those guys, but I think for Savion Hiter, I think it'll come down to Michigan and Tennessee, and I think Michigan will eventually get the job done. NIL, I think will play a factor. I won't go too much into that, but I think yeah, I think they're well positioned to land him. And as you said, they've got a couple other offers out. So Ryan Estrada was one. I'll just go to my notes. He said that Michigan was a great school, and he's looking to build a relationship with Sharon Moore and Tony Alford moving forward. But the one thing with him is that he's got a packed official visit schedule. I think he's gonna. I don't think he has a free weekend moving forward until the end of the quiet period. So he's got Mizzou, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Tulane, and Alabama. And I think Bama is clearly in the lead for him at the moment. And then another one was Carson Baker, who they offered. There hasn't been much of a development there since that offer. I think he's got a lot of other schools, including Ohio State, on his mind at the moment. But yeah, I think it'll come down to Hyder and Latimer as their two primary targets. We'll see if they can get an official visit for Estrada. But yeah, I wouldn't. If as a Michigan fan myself, I'm not too worried about the chatter around Tennessee and Ohio State with Hyder. I think that always. I mean, you're always going to see that with these 5-star and 4-star recruits. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, and I think he was probably the one that the break in communication people talked about the most. So it was good to see Alfred get out there and see him right away. And I mean, this isn't a new relationship, right? They've been recruiting him for a while. So, but
yeah,
yeah, I fall in love with the guy recruiting tape wise running back every year. It feels like that is either underrated or has a really strong offer list or whatever it was. Darian Dupree was a guy in a previous cycle, ended up at Wisconsin. I just really liked his tape. And I know Michigan was getting linked to guys like Taylor Tatum and some bigger names, but I was like, man, I really like this Dupree guy. And that's been Latimer for me. His tape just, it's so good. And it's such an obvious Michigan fit. And his offer list far exceeds his recruiting rankings. And you see that there's just certain schools where you're like, when these schools are all involved, then you know it's a good running back, right?
yeah.
And that's him. So, uh, if you had to put your chips on the table right now, yes or no, are Hyder and Latimer the two running back commits for Michigan at the end of the cycle?
I'd say yes to Hyder. I don't. I'm 50-50 on Latimer at the moment. I'm
I
not
want him so
as
bad.
much as I'd like
Want
to. Yeah, I mean, he's an every down back as well. I mean, I watched his tape before,
yes.
and I watched radio scouting report. I mean, that's what's interesting. I think if they bring in Hyder and Latimer, it will be interesting to see how that duo played out because I think they're both really like they can play every down.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see how that played out. But
That's a good point. I mean, we're kind of coming into that this season with Haynes and Marshall, where it's like there's not the thunder and lightning per se anymore. The running backs that have been
Yeah,
going in the room, there's a similar skill set. Micah Kapana maybe sticks out right now as a guy that is more speed over
yeah, yeah.
anything else. But yeah, it is going to be interesting. And then Jasper Parker already in the room as well. But like moving forward, you've got a
I've
lot of
heard
these
great
guys
things
that,
about him.
yeah. Yeah, I hope he gets some carries this year because he's probably going to be a major factor next year. But yeah, you've just got a lot of these guys that can do the short yardage, that can break runs, that, maybe aren't your consistent home run hitter every down, but like a lot of Corum type dudes, right? Like I hate comparing anyone to Blake Corum, but you see these guys that just fight through tackles, make good cuts, can hit the home run when the field's open in front of them. A lot of similar skill set dudes that, I mean, Michigan knows what they do well and they're looking for guys that fit.
Yeah, just on Latimer, I think the one thing that I'd be concerned about with him is that we heard all at the start of this year, the end of last year, that Osborne and Hyde would be happy to play with one another, and that they'd love
Correct.
to play with one another and create that, Sonic and Knuckles joy that we see with Detroit. But in the end, when Notre Dame came, I mean, what I heard from one source, I can't confirm if it was 100% true, but they pushed really hard on that narrative that Osborne wasn't the number one guy for Michigan, and that Hyder was that number one guy for Michigan, and that they had Osborne as their number one guy. So it'd be interesting to see if another school makes a push for Latimer like that. If
It's a
Michigan
great
does
point.
eventually land Hyder, yeah, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Because I mean, people can say things, but when it comes down to it with the commitment, you never really know what can happen. I suppose.
And I think that's where, fair or not, the narrative criticism would come in with Alford because let's be honest, when he left Ohio State, what did they say? That, hey, he keeps you in the recruitments with these top guys, but doesn't close, right? And again, fair or not, if your pitch was this duo, you spent all this time pitching Osborne and Hyder on a duo, but then actually what Osborne wanted to hear was, I want to be the guy,
Yeah,
right? That's where that narrative comes in. But every recruit's going to love to be treated that way too. How often do we hear that
yeah,
about feeling the
exactly.
love and I'm the top guy? And that's a really good point with Latimer. I hadn't considered. Because yeah, if Hyder, because they're clearly going to make Hyder the top priority. Not that they don't want
Yeah, for
Latimer,
sure.
but they're not going to tell Latimer he's the top guy because he's not, right?
It's just, I
So
think everyone knows that too, and
yeah,
he'd know
yeah.
that.
Not that he couldn't come in and be that guy, right? And
Yeah,
there's always a
exactly.
role for two running backs here, but yeah, just from purely a recruitment standpoint, that's a really good point. All right, let's go ahead and button it up. Is there anything you want to mention in terms of visitors to watch coming into the weekend, or any big things you're going to be keeping an eye on in the next few days?
Just on the official visitors on the weekend, I think a lot of Michigan recruiting guys, I think that our main focus is going to be on how the visit with Shadarius Tootle goes, because he's coming off that Georgia OV a couple of weekends ago, and they made a really big impression.
Yeah,
And I think there was a lot of momentum, at least from my perspective coming out of the spring, that Michigan was going to land a commitment from him. I mean, I even put in a future cast, which is now not looking so great. But I think Michigan will need to do a fair bit if they want to change the tide there a little bit. But I think the other official visitors they've got coming in is Christian Ward, Zion Robinson. That's actually a big one. He's a pretty big wide receiver target for them for the outside. Ian Premer. I'm not sure if that one's still going ahead. I had some stuff today that that one might not be going ahead. And then Damari Simeon, that one just came out yesterday. That he'd be getting on. He announced the top four recently. Michigan doesn't have many interior defensive line targets, so that'll be an important one. And then the other two are Jax Tanner and Jordan Deck, which are from, I think if they pushed really hard for either of them, I think they could secure a commitment. Both of them told me that Michigan is in their top two recently, and that Michigan is a favorite school for both of them. So I think Jordan Deck would be maybe one they prioritize a bit more. As I said before, Tanner is a bit similar to Bear McWhorter, so I'm not sure if they take both of them this cycle. But yeah,
you heard it first. Aidan said Jordan Deck is going to commit coming out of the weekend, so you can hold. I'm just kidding. All right, do me a favor. Plug yourself, and obviously, where people can find all the intel and everything you've been posting for us at Maize Blue Review.
oh, it's just that Aidan Sen 123 on Twitter, and on the site with Maize Blue review. Josh, Trevor, Seth, Brock, all the guys have got stuff coming out at the Wazoo at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you've been blowing some folks away, and it's funny with the time change too, because like people wake up and you've got like 5 pieces of intel from 1:30 in the morning or whatever. But I don't know how you do it, but we appreciate you, man, and the coverage you've been bringing has been a welcome addition to our community. And I know our subscribers have spoken up, and those that aren't already, whether you know Aidan on Twitter or you don't, michigan.rivals.com, you can get access to, again, the info he's dropping on when guys are visiting, where things stand, things he's hearing from the players, coaches, their families, etc. And there's a lot out there right now. Michigan is chugging along. So our plan is to do this every week. This will be part of our regular cycle. Again, we've got Dennis with his daily live show. Good afternoon, Michigan football and basketball. Going to talk about Yaxel, I'm pretty sure, next time he comes on and hails to the podcast every Sunday. So make sure you're liking, subscribing, and do the notification bell here on the site so you know when we go live. You can be a part of the conversation and ask questions, or of course you can stream us on Spotify, Apple, everywhere you find podcasts. And then other than that, like I said, michigan.rivals.com. For now, I'm not sure come July 1 if the website name will change, but obviously things are only going to get better once we move over to the On3 platform and all the additional resources and content we will get there from there. And of course, all the recruiting coverage is moving over to the Rivals brand. So for Aidan, I'm going to say thank you guys for joining us on Who's Got Next, and we'll see you next week, hopefully talking the commitments that Aidan guaranteed are going to happen. We'll talk about that next week. All right. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.